What's up everyone? It's been a while, but I'm back now with another DraftKings video. This time we're going to be talking about the opening slate for the MLB regular season. Personally, in Major League Baseball is the thing that I follow the closest, even more so than the NFL. But DFS for baseball is very difficult in my opinion, but I'm looking forward to this season. Also, I want to go ahead and say to drop your suggestions down in the comment section below because I'm not sure how many videos I should do a week. Right now I'm leaning towards 2, and I'm also a little bit confused on when I should actually do the videos and for what slates. Obviously, the MLB season is a very long and grueling season, and they have days where, not many teams will play, but there'll still be games. There's basically slates every single day up until the All-Star break, and there'll be a few days with no games, and then the rest of the baseball season there'll be slates. So right now I'm leaning towards doing a video on Tuesday for the Wednesday slate and a video on Friday for the Saturday slate. Usually, obviously this is a special slate, so I don't really know, but again, give me suggestions down below. Also, I want to mention that these videos will not be nice and fancy and have the great graphics and at least the semi-great graphics, I guess, that I usually have in my NFL videos, just because these videos are making those graphics actually take quite a bit of time. So I just want to be able to get these videos out as quick as I can because obviously, less than 24 hours most of the time these videos are actually going to be relevant. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into our picks, and good luck this week. All right, so starting off here with a couple of pitchers. The first guy I want to talk about is Masahiro Tanaka, and this is a very, very favorable matchup for Tanaka in my opinion. So just taking a quick glance at his splits here, you can see right away he actually performed better on the road last season than he did at home. I guess Tanaka does not like pitching in New York, obviously, with those short porches on either side of him. You can also see here, if we take a look at the quick matchup, that last season the Tampa Bay Rays were the 28th ranked offense. I don't think they're going to be quite that bad this season, but they haven't really upgraded their team immensely, so we still could see pretty poor numbers like that. Looking at some other stats that you can't see on the screen currently, the Rays batted 194 as a team last season against Tanaka. Tanaka had a sub-3 ERA. He went 4-0. He had 34 strikeouts and 34.1 innings pitched. This is just looking like a really, really good situation for Tanaka, and honestly, you can see that he's right in the middle of the pricing range pretty much. So everything together, I think Tanaka is going to be a pretty popular pick, but I think he's also a very safe pick, even though a lot of people are still worried about his right arm and think it's a ticking time bomb. But still, I think this, all in all, is a pretty good situation for Tanaka, and I'm definitely going to be playing quite a bit of him. So for our second pitcher, I have Jon Lester, and I think this is another really, really good situation for him. So first off, just taking a quick look at his splits. His splits aren't quite as dramatic as we saw with Tanaka, in my opinion, but he still had pretty good numbers. He's a pretty well-rounded pitcher. It really doesn't matter where he is, but you can see right here, he dominated the St. Louis Cardinals last season. They only batted 157 against him. He had 21 strikeouts and only 20.2 innings pitched. He also went 2-0, and you can see here it says a 0.0 ERA. Technically, it's not quite right. He had a .87 ERA, but regardless, he averaged 28 fantasy points per game against the Cardinals. I expect Jon Lester to be another popular pick. This is going to be an interesting situation to see if he is going to be as popular as I think he is, because you have Bumgarner right above him. So, some people are not going to justify themselves paying $10.6 for Lester when you can just, cough up a couple extra $100 and get to Bumgarner. Personally, I think that Bumgarner is going to be too popular for my taste. So I think I'm never going to fade Bumgarner altogether, but I think that maybe playing a little bit more Lester than Bumgarner is actually probably a good strategy in this particular situation. All right, so moving into the toughest position on the slate, in my opinion, and that's catcher. I'm leaning towards Buster Posey. I think Gary Sanchez is going to be a very popular pick, and with good reason. I mean, the dude is tearing it up. He was a monster last season for most of it, at least second half, and he's still playing pretty well. But he's the most expensive guy on the slate, and I think there's a lot of pressure on Sanchez. But more importantly, Joe Girardi has come out and said that we can expect Gary Sanchez to bat second most days in the lineup. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of Sanchez batting second. Not very many opportunities for him to get RBIs unless he's just going to drive himself in, obviously, hitting a home run or something like that. So I'm leaning towards Posey in this situation. Sanchez also does not have a very big sample size against Chris Archer. So Posey has a massive sample size against Zach Greinke. He's 12 for 37 with a batting, so he's batting 324. Nothing monstrous. He only has a few RBIs, no home runs, but he's putting the bat on the ball. Almost has a 400 on base percentage against Zach Greinke. So this is going to be in Chase Field in Arizona. The ball is going to carry out of there. I'm not sure if they're going to play with it open or not. I would assume they're probably going to play with it closed, honestly. But so we can take a look at his splits here. He's another one of those guys, kind of like Lester I mentioned. His numbers are not drastically different as far as fantasy goes. I mean, you can see his average takes a pretty big dip in away games, but even though his average takes a big dip, his fantasy points per game, so his fantasy production doesn't. Nothing crazy against Arizona either. So I'm leaning towards Posey. All right, so moving to the first base position. I think I'm looking at the guy who's probably going to be the most popular. I'm really indecisive on whether he's going to be popular or he's not at all, because Paul Goldschmidt absolutely rakes against left-handed pitching, and he's facing a left-hander this time, but he's facing arguably the best pitcher in baseball, not only the best left-handed pitcher in baseball, and you could have the Bumgarner-Kershaw argument all day long, but one of the best pitchers in baseball is Madison Bumgarner, and he's facing him. Now, he has a relatively good sample size against him. We can pull this up really quickly, but over here on my other monitor, I have that Goldschmidt is actually batting 283 in 56 plate appearances against him. He has 13 hits, a pair of home runs, like 6 RBIs, 4 doubles as well. So he has a fair amount of looks at Bumgarner. He's actually seen 253 pitches in game versus Madison Bumgarner. Leaps and bounds the most on the San Francisco Giants. On the Arizona Diamondbacks against the Giants. Leaps and bounds the most on his team. So, it's tough to say. We can take a look at his splits here and whatnot. He's going to be at home, so that's definitely a bonus. He's definitely not a player who has a significant jump, in playing home or away, but he does have a little bit more fantasy points per game. And that was last season, obviously. All these numbers are based off, previous seasons and whatnot. So that's pretty much all we have to go off right now, obviously. You can see he didn't do anything super special against the Giants last year, but I'm really like I said, I'm very, very indecisive and very, very much questioning myself whether he's going to be a popular pick or not. I'll tell you another guy that I'm really considering is Greg Bird. Greg Bird is now, a couple weeks ago, I believe it was, he was announced he's starting first baseman. We pretty much have no numbers on him because he was hurt last season. He doesn't have a big sample size against Chris Archer either, but he's been tearing it up in spring training, and I'm not a big guy. For me, I don't really look at numbers in spring training. I look at the eye test, and Greg Bird looks like he was in midseason form already. So for me, I think Bird's going to be a guy I'm going to consider as well, especially if I need to get a cheap guy out there. All right, so moving into our second base position. So here, once again, you have quite a few choices. No one really jumps off the board. You definitely couldn't just say I want to play the Cubs second baseman because, look at all these players they have that are eligible at second base for DraftKings. Anyway, Ben Zobrist has had some luck against Carlos Martinez. Castro has had some luck against Archer. I'm leaning towards Starlin Castro right now, to be honest with you, just because he's a bit cheaper. Once again, none of these guys really jump off the board to me. None of them have stupid good matchups, and we don't really have a ton of numbers. We don't really know what to expect out of them this year. Castro really didn't hit that particularly well on the road. He didn't hit that great on turf either. So it's tough to say, but we can take a look at the splits here. You can see that he struggled on the road. Did have a 2-point difference in fantasy points per game on the road, which is actually a pretty big difference. That said, he is, let's see here if I can pull it up quickly. He's 4 for 12 against Chris Archer, batting 333. Just have 1 home run, 5 RBIs, and he's only struck out twice in 12 plate appearances. So he does appear that he's seen the ball pretty well against Archer, which is nice. He also hit like 305, I think it was, in April of last season. So maybe he's a quick starter. So that would be nice to see. So I'm going to go with Castro. But again, this is another one of those toss-up positions for me. Just no guy is, a clear-cut favorite here. But if I had to pick one of those guys, it'd probably be Zobrist. But he is the most expensive guy, and you could get away with putting him in the outfield if you wanted to. So I'm going to go with Castro here as my favorite play, as be kind of sneaky guy to play in tournaments. All right, so looking at the third basemans now, I'll be honest with you, once again, not really that one clear-cut guy to me. I can tell you there's more players that I look at here that I know I don't want to pick than there are that I'm considering, to be honest with you. First off, I'm not going to play Chris Bryant probably at all. I think I'm going to completely fade him. I'll probably end up regretting this because you should never do that to KB, the MVP. But, he struggles big time against Carlos Martinez, who's on the mound for him. Not a fan of the price, and, he's on the road. It just, everything is stacking against him right now. So maybe he'll have a successful game, but I just can't really fathom playing him at third base or in the outfield in this particular situation. And everybody else is just kind of to me. So I'm going to go with Longoria. We already know Longoria is listed as day-to-day, but he's going to play. It's already been said right here. The manager for the Tampa Bay Rays, Kevin Cash, has already announced it. Just issues with his neck. He doesn't have a ton of success, historical success against Tanaka at least, and we're going to get a little bit of negative correlation there. But this is just one of those weird slates where, there's just not enough games in the sense of where you're probably going to have a couple players overlap. I'm also heavily considering Jake Lamb, but it's so tough for me. It's hard to fathom having two guys in the same lineup going up against Madison Bumgarner and having that lineup be successful. But he's a bit cheaper. He's a much better home hitter. So I guess we'll go ahead and put Jake Lamb instead of Longoria. Whoops. But Lamb struggles against left-handed pitching. I'll be honest with you. But in turn, he let me see what he's done here against. Where is he? Come on, there you are. So he doesn't have a big sample size against Bumgarner, but he is 1 for 3, so nothing special. But Jake Lamb's probably a really, really far stretch. Just maybe a place where you just need to pay up. Eduardo Nunez actually has some pretty good success against Zach Greinke, but for me, I'm just not a big Nunez fan. I can't really fathom paying that for him. Carpenter's not necessarily a bad pick either, but it's lefty on lefty, and it's not a really favorable matchup for him either. So again, one of the toughest positions to pick on the slate, in my opinion. So good luck nailing this spot. So taking a look at the shortstop position here, once again we see Nunez up at the top here. For me, I think Nunez is probably the best play here, but if you don't quite want to pay for that, I think Diaz is a really, really good play. I want to play Brandon Crawford because he played well in WBC, definitely has a little bit more games under his belt, and is probably closer to, I wouldn't say midseason, but he's probably closer to actually, seeing live big league pitching than a lot of the other guys have been because they've been playing in spring training, and, obviously they haven't been facing top-tier level talent day in and day out. So, but Crawford has struggled against Greinke. He's not that good on the road. So I think if I had to pick any of these guys, I even have some interest in Addison Russell and Brad Miller. Pretty much these top 5 guys here are all very playable in my opinion. I think I'm leaning towards Diaz just because he's a bit cheaper than Nunez. I will tell you that Diaz is actually historically, at least last season did not hit very well against lefties. Didn't have a lot of chances against Leicester. I believe he only had about 3 at-bats or so. We can take a look at his splits here. On the road, he actually seemed to perform a bit better, so this is going to be a home game, but even at home, he still performed very, very well. You see on the season, he batted over 300 exactly. So I'm interested to see who's going to be the most popular player here. Probably going to be Nunez maybe, but I think Diaz is actually a pretty good choice here, and I'm very, very curious to see what he's going to do against left-handed pitching this particular season because he hit very, very well against righties, and usually you wouldn't see a right-handed hitter struggle so much against lefties. So hopefully he can pick that up this season, and if he does, he's pretty much going to be a guy you're going to have to borderline consider every single day, especially at the shortstop position. All right, so finishing up here with a few outfielders, and this is where pretty much every single night, just about, not always, but almost every single night, your money is going to be won or lost. You have so many different outfielders to choose from, and that's where a lot of the production in most teams come from. So, taking a look at it here, there's 2 guys in particular I want to talk about. Number 1 being Jacoby Ellsbury. For some reason, Jacoby Ellsbury just smashes Chris Archer. I don't know what it is. He has 38 plate appearances. He has 19 hits. 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, and he's batting .559 right now with an over 1,000 OPS against Chris Archer. So very interesting numbers there. Ellsbury is not a guy who's extremely expensive in this particular slate. He's only at 3,600 here. He didn't really do that much last season, so it's very intriguing to me that Ellsbury hits so well against a such a really, really solid, arguably borderline elite-ish player in Chris Archer. Taking a look at the splits here, you can see he actually performed a little bit better on the road, so that bodes well for him in this particular matchup as well. Batting average almost identical, but he had a little bit more power. Didn't hit quite as many doubles. I guess he maybe had a little bit more. No more stolen bases. I'm not really sure where he was getting those extra few fantasy points. Actually, clearly it's very obvious now. It's these RBIs right here. Significant more amount RBIs on the road. So yeah, I don't know what it is, but Ellsbury is probably going to be a sneaky player for some people, especially if you're big on these batter first pitchers matchup. Which early in the season, I think BVP is definitely a good thing to look at, so you can see how they're doing historically against guys. So another cheap sneaky guy I want to talk about is Kevin Kiermaier. And once again, if you're into these batter versus pitcher numbers, then you're going to eat this up, because Kevin Kiermaier is batting .455 against Masahiro Tanaka for some reason. I don't know what it is, but he's 5 for 11 right now with a home run, a triple, and a few runs scored and an RBI. He only has one strikeout and over 10 at bats too, so that's good. Also Kiermaier obviously has a little bit of upside with stolen bases as well. I think he had like plus 20 or over. Yeah, he had over 20 stolen bases last season. He actually struggles a little bit at home, which is kind of interesting. I say struggles. He hasn't scored quite as many fantasy points. But I think this is actually a really, really good price. And if you don't really want to go with Ellsbury, but you still need to save some funds somewhere, I think Kevin Kiermaier is actually a really, really good player. And you can look at the prices here. I mean, some of the guys he's around the price range. I mean, you can see Jarrett Parker here, Colby Rasmus. All these guys do not average anywhere near as many fantasy points as Kevin Kiermaier, but he's still around this price. So it's probably due to the matchup, but in this case, it almost even favors Kiermaier even more because he hits Tanaka pretty well. So, for me, I think Kiermaier is a guy I'm going to be playing quite a bit of. Maybe not quite as much as I probably will be playing him more than Ellsbury, I should say. At least in my opinion, I think Ellsbury is a good play as well. But if you need some cheap guys, he's definitely a interesting guy to go with. So for the final guy that I am heavily considering this particular week in the outfield, or this particular slate, I guess I should say, not week, and that's going to be Denard Span. So not quite cheap enough to actually make this a lineup. This is not going to be a lineup at all. I don't recommend playing this as a lineup. This will not be successful in my opinion. Maybe it will be. You can try it if you want, but this is not going to be a lineup that I'm going to make. If you want to make it a lineup, go with somebody like maybe Pollock was interesting. I wouldn't go with Holiday, but you can go with him if you want. Piscotty is a little bit scary to go with right now because he changed his swing so much, but maybe you could go with him. Anyway, I'm considering Denard Span. First off, Span is actually scoring a little bit more points on the road than at home for some reason, which is interesting. You can see his average is a little bit lower. His on base is a little bit lower. But he's walked a little bit more, hit another extra home run here and there. I've talked quite a bit about batter versus pitcher in this particular video, but it's a huge thing to look at, but particularly when they have such big sample sizes. He's had almost 50 plate appearances. He's seen 163 pitches against Greinke in game. He's gone 46 for 14. It's not great, but he's batting over 300. Has a home run, has a pair of doubles and a triple, and also 5 RBIs. But the big thing for me is he only has 3 strikeouts in 49 plate appearances. That is not a lot of strikeouts at all. I mean, when you face a pitcher that many times, you would figure he's going to get your number at least 5, 6, 7, 8, even more times when it comes to strikeouts, especially a guy like Greinke, who's a pretty big strikeout pitcher. At least he has been the past few seasons. So to see that Span is getting the bat on the ball quite a bit. He also is a threat to steal a base here and there. You can see he had 13 stolen bases last season. So I think Span is a good play. I wouldn't say he's my favorite play in the outfield, but most of the really easy picks in the outfield are relatively obvious in my opinion. But I think Span is another guy that I'm definitely going to be considering. All right, so there you have it. I'll be honest, I know it was kind of a sloppy video. I mean, I didn't really have it's tough. I don't have a lot of numbers that go off of here. You could almost argue that the beginning of the season is just kind of going off of past numbers, looking at a lot of at batter versus pitcher, but also a lot of it you could just argue is your gut feeling on who's a good play and who's not. This is a very small slate, so you're going to have some negative correlation here and there. Especially if you're going to play like, say, a guy like Tanaka and then play Kevin Kiermaier, you're going to have some negative correlation there. It's just kind of how it is. And same thing with Diaz and John Lester. So, you need to figure out if the negative correlation is worth, risking and things like that. Also try to figure out if that's going to be a popular play, especially in these small slates. You really got to go with some just oddball guys that people they're not going to pick. So, if you see a guy who, is just tossed very high in the lineup for no reason, just because maybe a guy is hurt, or maybe it's a lefty in the mound and they want to put a righty in the at bat, whatever the case is, take advantage of that. Look at as many numbers as you can for baseball, because it's such a sabermetric driven game that numbers are really important. But right now we just don't have a ton to go off, obviously, for this season, because I don't value spring training numbers really at all. I told you earlier, I go off the eye test. If the player looks ready, then that's kind of a reassuring feeling for me. So most of these guys are probably not going to play too well. We'll see. Hopefully it'll be a high scoring day and we can see a lot of runs coming across the board and a lot of close games and different things like that. But be sure to let me know down in the comment section below how many videos you want to see and when I should do them. But once again, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't. Also, I want to mention I actually have a gaming channel now, a sports gaming channel. I had one back in the day, had like 10,000 subscribers. Some complications happened, but I've decided to start doing that again. I also stream on Twitch. You can find all those links down below. Anyway, if you made it this far, once again, thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Later.